Hello, viewers, and welcome back to the Star Trek Hit or Miss podcast. This is episode number 7, and this is a different type of episode. We're switching things up this week. You'll have noticed by the thumbnail and the tweets that I've been putting out that we are doubling up on our episode reviews because we're reviewing short treks, so we'll be doing 2 of those. But as well as doubling up on episodes, I'm doubling up on guests this week. I have 2 guests for the price of 1 from various places all over the world. So why don't you introduce yourself, and we'll start with you, Chris.
Yeah, I'm Chris, Shelf Nerds on Twitter, and I'm from Florida in the United States.
Awesome. And Dan?
Hello there, I'm Dan. I am known on Twitter as Mr. Earl G, and I'm dialing in from Edmonton in Canada.
Awesome. And I'm your usual host, Mike, and I'm just here in the northeast of England, as per usual, lamenting the crap weather. But so just to clarify, if we have any new viewers or anything, this podcast basically breaks down into sections. The first one is basically a getting to know you type thing, where I launch some questions at my guest, or in this case, guests, just about sort of Star Trek in general and some favorite things. The second section is the hit or miss section, where likewise, my guests won't know any of the things that I'm firing at you, but it will basically be things from anywhere in the Star Trek franchise. And I'll have to ask you guys in order if you think it's a hit or a miss, and we'll debate back and forth. And because there's 3 of us, we'll actually be able to get an official consensus. I can basically act as a tiebreaker if necessary, I guess, for this particular week. And then after that, we will just go into the main section, which is the review of the 2 aforementioned short treks, that being Q&A and Ask Not. And then I'll just finish up with the usual kind of audience interaction. I didn't have a lot, but there was a little bit. So, yeah, that's all good. And so I will start us off with the first section, which is the section that I call Hailing Frequencies Open, which is my geeky way of being like introducing people to us all here listening. So what I'm going to do then is to ask you guys, first of all, what was it that first introduced you to the world of Star Trek, first hooked you in? And can you remember the very first episode you ever watched? And we'll start with you, Chris.
Yeah, I was born in 1987, so my parents watched TNG, so I've been seeing it since I was conscious. I don't remember the first episode of TNG that I watched, but I do have a distinct memory of like Data sitting at the science station and Geordi and Picard leaning over him. That's
right.
all I have.
That doesn't narrow it down, but fair enough.
Not at all.
Awesome. So your very first exposure was probably just random episodes of Next Generation then?
Yeah, I remember coloring and my coloring book laying in front of the TV as my parents watched it on Sunday afternoon or something like that.
Nice. That's cool. It's weird to think how international Star Trek is, because, as I say, we're from 3 different countries and we've all probably got our own experiences, but we all watched the same show, which is weird. So, but yeah. So if you had to pick a favorite series, would it be the one you started with, Next Gen, or is there another that's taken your number 1 spot since?
Pre-COVID, I would have said Voyager.
Right.
Post-COVID, I found in moments of anxiety and stress, I kept going back to TNG, so I have to say TNG.
Fair enough. I think both of those are pretty, what's the word I'm looking for? Soothing, I guess, in a way.
Yes,
not overly tense and not quite as ongoing story arc as something like DS9 or Discovery. So, yeah, cool. And Dan, can you remember what your first episode was, or your exposure that got you interested in Star Trek? What hooked you in?
Well, I'm a little older, so I grew up in the 70s, and so
Wow.
I was watching TOS reruns. I wasn't old enough to watch it on the original broadcast, but my dad got me into it. He was a big sci-fi fan, and so I grew up kind of watching whenever Star Trek happened to be on, and we were both around. We watched it together. I don't remember the first episode that I watched, but my first definite Star Trek memory was being taken to see The Wrath of Khan with my dad
Nice.
in the theaters. And I was still young enough that opening scene, though, just completely terrified me with the worms going into the ears, and I had to leave. So,
Oh no,
That's
but
terrifying
thankfully,
at any age.
yeah. Well, thankfully I wasn't so traumatized that I quit Trek. So I've continued to be a Trekkie ever since. I think my comfort show is also TNG though, because I got to that when I was in my teens when that started, and it's just sort of had the status as a kind of comfort show for me ever since.
Yeah, I think, as I said, TNG and Voyager are my two favorites, but I do like the entire franchise, to be fair. I didn't really get your answer. Sorry for that one, Chris. About was there an episode you can remember being, oh, I love this show, I'm going to keep watching it, that really sparked your imagination for the first time?
I think it's the role model of Picard and the curiosity of Data that really drew me in. So there's not one episode that I can remember being like, oh, that got me. But I guess with those two criteria, Measure a Man might be the one I claim.
Okay,
I was too young to remember Measure a Man when it came on.
Yeah, that's fair enough, though. I can understand that. And did you have any similar type experience, Dan, or were you just also like, nope, it's just there, and I can't remember the first time, I just loved it?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I had always really liked the show, really enjoyed it. The thing that I think, if there's one episode that kind of took me to a different level in my watching of Trek, was Best of Both Worlds Part 1.
Okay.
Just because, yeah, I mean, I think everyone who saw that live on TV and is old enough to kind of have that memory, like me and all my friends were just on pins and needles the whole summer, just because it was kind of a turning point for TNG, certainly, almost for the franchise. Is sort of confirmed that TNG was going to stay, that it had something new to give the Trek universe, and it was broader than just Trekkies. At the time, it was a kind of a TV event, and I think a lot of new people tuned in to start watching the following season. Yeah.
I've heard a lot about that particular episode and that big cliffhanger moment from people that were there. I obviously wasn't. I'm a little bit younger than you, Dan, a little bit older than you, Chris. So I wasn't able to watch it live. And my first exposure to Best of Both Worlds was a videotape where it was edited into one thing. So I never really, it took me a little while. It took me a while before I even saw the cliffhanger. But I remember when I watched it for the first time, I was like, I get how this would be really impactful, especially if you've got to now wait months to see what happens next. So yeah, I understand that. And so the next question that I usually give in this section, sorry to put you guys on the spot, but if you had to pick 3 episodes anywhere in the franchise, and 2-parters count as one story/episode, but if you had to pick 3 to represent the very best of what you think Star Trek is, and to show to any new viewer that you would be trying to hook into Star Trek, what 3 would they be? And I'll mix it up. I'll start with you, Dan, this time.
Okay, goodness. Let's see. I think that to start someone off, to be honest, if I would go with one of the new series,
Right. Okay.
most likely Discovery, just because unless someone, like, for instance, if I knew someone was my age, like knew a lot of older TV and was able to process older TV, because otherwise, if I wouldn't want to sort of start someone off with, I'm not going to say to like a 20-year-old, oh, you've got to start with the Cage, and it's just going to look so dated and so out of. So I don't think I'm going to offer you 3 separate episodes. I think if I wanted to just get someone into Trek or show them for the first time, I'd start with the opening of Discovery.
Fair enough. And I'm going to use this opportunity to plug the episode, I believe it was episode 3, where I did actually show an 18-year-old friend of mine The Cage, which was the first episode he ever watched, because I was interested to see. And weirdly enough, he did like it. So as it turns out, Yeah, but
Yeah, I mean, I didn't mean to say that
no, no.
all younger folks are too close-minded to watch older shows. Just
No, I know what you mean, but I mean, I did give him the proviso that be aware it's very kind of 1960s, and you're not going to be wowed by the effects and things. But he's, I know him because we're both Doctor Who fans, and so we're used to the kind of very, very basic 1960s Doctor Who effects. So I know you can look past that and kind of see story beyond some pretty limited budgets. So that's why I was like, I'm comfortable enough to let you start here. Most other people, I might be like, well, maybe jump into one with a bit better effects. But yeah. So failing that, then, do you have 3 episodes that you think you would see are the very best of what Trek can represent in your eyes, or not?
Yeah. So of course, like I love the kind of more thoughtful episodes. So something like Measure of a Man is always great to me, or The Drumhead as well. Those I keep going back to TNG, but those things that really, something that has a perspective and an issue, and it's not really always the most heavily sci-fi kind of thing in Trek. It's I mean, even if Measure a Man, you're talking about an android, it's almost not about an android. It's about what makes us human, right?
Yeah, it's about personhood. Yeah,
right. So I think those are the kind of episodes that I would gravitate towards as being really the most meaningful to me.
Fair enough. So if you were to see a Measure of a Man and The Drumhead, what would you slot into that third place? Would it be another Next Gen, or would it be?
I think I would. Let's see. I don't know. I'll have to pass on picking out a single one as a third.
Okay.
Sorry.
In which case, I'm just going to give you Far Beyond the Stars, because I just want everyone to pick that one. So
sure,
from TS9, because that was one of my choices. But with that in mind, Chris, you've had plenty of time to think it through. So same question: what would be your 3 that you would pick as either the best or something to give new viewers to introduce them to what Star Trek can do?
Well, I feel like that's 2 questions, because my list would be different for new viewers and
fair enough
for the best, right?
Yeah, give me 2 lists. Cool, awesome.
Yeah, I'll give 2 lists. The more Trek, the better, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So for new viewers, I think I would go with Best of Both Worlds and Family, as this kind of cinematic experience that touches on the big sci-fi action and the personal character storytelling.
Yeah.
Of course, with Picard and Family, but also Riker. I mean, Best of Both Worlds is a Riker episode that happens to feature Picard becoming the cutest.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, someone has to be left in charge. That's the thing. If you don't have somebody bringing up that captain slot now that Picard's captured, then the episode kind of falls apart, doesn't it? So,
but before that, they're really exploring who is Riker now, and is he happy with who he is? Who does he want to be? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I guess I'll count that as 2 episodes. Best of Both Worlds is 1, Family as the second one.
Okay.
And then Far Beyond the Stars, I had on my list because
awesome.
I used to be an English teacher, and I used to teach Far Beyond the Stars.
Awesome.
In one of my units, and that would be some kids' first exposure to any Star Trek. They have no background knowledge, just that's it, and tears in the room from students.
I can believe it. Yeah, Star Trek is window dressing to that episode, but it could be any sci-fi that they're kind of talking about, really, couldn't it?
Exactly. So that's what I would show new fans, because I have done that. And then the best of the series, I mean, there's so many to pick from, but the first one that came to my mind is Latent Image from Voyager.
Oh, I love that. That's one of my personal favorites that nobody ever mentions.
That is super powerful. Yep. One of the best pieces of writing and acting in Star Trek. Yes. So Latent Image, best of Star Trek, Far Beyond the Stars will be on that list, though, too.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely.
And then to get a last one to round it out, I really think Crisis Point is a high point in the series from Lower Decks.
Yeah.
But it is only great because if you're a fan of Star Trek, I think it celebrates everything we love about Star Trek, right? So that's why I would choose it. That or Keshan, His Eyes Open.
Yeah, fair
I'll
enough.
just stop now.
No, that's fair enough. That's all good. But no, I'm pleased with those choices because I love Latent Image. I think the 1-2 punch of Latent Image and then Bride of Chaotica for completely different reasons are two different 5-star episodes back to back. Couldn't be more different, but I love them both. So,
Yes,
yeah.
Voyager has a lot of great in it.
So what I will do then, I'll move us to the very next section, and that's the section that the podcast is named for, and it's the hit or miss section. So as I said, basically, I have a list that I wrote a while ago, just at random. Neither of you know what's coming because I don't tell anyone in advance. As I say, I'll just fire the what it is out, and then Chris, as I say, if you tell me if you think it's a hit or a miss and a bit of explanation as to why, maybe, and then Dan, you do the same, and I'll jump in and either tie break or agree or disagree and give my own 2 cents. Right, so sorry to over-explain, but the very first thing on the list for today, and I don't know why, the very first thing I have written here is the Voyager J from Discovery. Hit or miss, Chris?
A definite hit.
Okay, and why?
It's just beautiful looking. It's sleek. It's still recognizably Voyager inspired, and it really just draws the viewer in to want to know more about its interior and how it functions and want to see it moving. They teased us so much and didn't show us enough of it in Discovery season 3, so hoping that we get more in season 4.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dan, hit or miss for you for the Voyager J?
I'll say it's a hit. I love how sharp it is.
Yes.
People joke about Discovery looking like a pizza cutter, and the Voyager J kind of looks like a cake slicer. So,
tell us how you say that. Yeah.
I like the kitchen theme.
Yeah.
But no, like that little, the scene like glimpsing the inside of Star Trek headquarters in the 32nd century again is just, it's a marvel, and it's just so fun to get that glimpse and look over all those ships, and the J was definitely a highlight of that.
Awesome, absolutely. Yeah, I always think it looks a bit more like a can opener because of that just dead space at the back, the little ring. So it's kind of,
more than that, it suggests that Voyager became a really prominent starship in Starfleet history, that it continued on as a series of ships. So that's really cool to me. Yeah,
I agree. I think it's a hit. I have slight reservations, but it's all things that are just because I want to see more, which has got to be, I've got to therefore say it's a hit, because I love the way the design looks. I love the little enhancements that they gave it for Star Trek Online, just to give it a bit more detail and show you kind of where the weapons are and stuff. And yeah, I just, I'm personally very on board with the detached pieces and the cells and everything. I know some people aren't, but I'm fine with it. And I like that it does just evoke the shape of the kind of Intrepid class Voyager, and you can almost immediately see, I get the lineage, I get what it is, Plus, exactly what you said, if it's the 11th one, then the original one has to have been famous enough to warrant keep naming them down the centuries. So very good, and I also hope we get to see more of it. So okay, it's a great start. Three positives. So we'll see if we can keep the positivity going. Number 2 on the list for today is simply Tribbles. Chris, hit or a miss?
Oh, a miss.
Oh, controversial.
Yeah. I mean, they're fine. They don't excite me. The Trouble with Tribbles is a fine episode, but I don't go back to it much for comfort, and I know some people do. It's a lot of fun. I prefer the DS9 rendition of it.
Yeah. Okay.
But the Tribbles themselves don't do much for me outside of the context that they're in.
Right. Okay. So you think they're very kind of one-note idea, and it's a little stale maybe by this point. Not put words in your mouth, but yeah. Awesome. And Dan, what would you say to the Tribbles, hit or a miss?
Well, I'll have to go with a hit.
Okay.
The original Trouble with Tribbles is maybe the high point of comedy for TOS.
Yeah.
It's such a nice thing to have that note of comedy early on, and I think even without the Tribbles being present, that kind of that kind of comic sensibility now and then, really enlivens Trek, and gives it a little bit more depth and range. So I totally get what Chris is saying about the triples themselves not doing much.
Yeah.
But so much happens around them that I wouldn't want to say goodbye to them.
Oh, I wouldn't want to say goodbye to them either, for sure.
You're just waiting on a new take, maybe to bring some life into them, to do something a bit more special, I guess.
No, I think by themselves they do their job, but when you just mentioned Tribble, by themselves they're fine. Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough. I will also go hit just because I have an affection for. Like, I guess it's probably more like what's done around them, because they can't really do a lot. They just sit there and coo, I guess. But it's just such
they
a
make
basic,
babies.
Well, yeah, and reproduce a lot apparently. But yeah, I just think whoever it is that came up with the idea, it's kind of weirdly ingenious that it's become part of the collective kind of pop culture consciousness that even non-Trekkies probably know what a tribble is. There's been many a time I've been over at my grandparents' house, and my grandma tells off my mum for leaving tribbles lying about because she just leaves rolled up hankies. She's not even that huge a Trekkie. It's just kind of like it's become the kind of lexicon for anything that spreads around and you can't get rid of it. So I like that Star Trek kind of has that place, but also I love how well that little thing is played for that comedy in Trouble with Tribbles especially, and also, like I say, Trials and Tribulations and things. And even though I wasn't a fan at first, even The Trouble with Edward, the short trek, really has grown on me because I've watched that about 4 times. The first time I was really kind of like, this isn't canon, I'm not having it. And then the more I watch, the more I think I appreciate what it's going for. So
I did find that more interesting use of the triples for sure as an origin story for them.
Yeah. I mean, it fits the tone and everything of their stories. And like I said, once I got over the kind of, because there's always kind of that little sci-fi nerd in me that's like, this is new information, I'm not having it. But yeah, I think it was good with what it did, and it's good having good comedic and good actors involved. So, but that's neither here nor there. So either way, we're sorry you're outvoted on this one, Chris, and we're seeing the triples for it.
The triples live on.
They do. Well, don't they bloomin' always?
Perhaps I'm part Klingon.
Maybe so. We'll be beaming them to your engine room imminently. So the next thing on the list, we've kind of vaguely touched on, I guess. The next thing I had on my list for today, hit or miss Beckett Mariner. Chris, what were your thoughts?
Oh, a hit.
Okay.
Not at first, though. I found her to be trying too hard,
right,
to be awesome at everything and witty, but that's part of her character.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until Crisis Point that it really clicked that she's a fully fledged, fully explored, deep character, that really the conflict is about herself.
Yes.
And in that episode, she fights a holographic representation of herself.
Yeah, very on the nose.
It's a very well, but I like it. I mean, it really solidifies who this character is, that she's struggling to figure out who she is.
I agree. Yeah, I think I can see what you mean. That at first you're kind of like, I'm kind of tired of this. I'm such a rebel type attitude, and then when you realize that is entirely a front, and she kind of wrestles with it herself, I think that really brings that character to life by the end of that first season. But anyway, getting ahead of myself. Dan, hit or miss for Beckett Mariner, would you say?
I'll have to go with a hit.
Okay.
I absolutely love the character. I think that Tawny Newsome just brings this amazing kind of manic energy to her, which is sort of perfect for her as like the lead for this particular show. I think I'm a little bit glad that the show is putting less centrality or less effort directly on her for season 2. Not because I don't think that she's a great character, but just if season 1 was always the limelight was on her, and it would have had the potential to get a little old and kind of turn into a shtick. But I think that with the other characters being more fully developed, including, outside the main four, the secondary cast on season 2, that what makes Beckett Mariner special and powerful and this comic dynamo is sort of preserved in the right combination. So I think it's a hit, although it's a hit I'm glad I'm seeing less of.
Okay,
that makes sense.
Yeah. I agree. I think she's a hit, and again, I had my reservations at first when it seemed like it was kind of, this is a character who thumbs her nose a little bit at Starfleet, but then again, perfect writing at the end of that first season when it's like, no, she's not disrespecting Starfleet. She just doesn't always agree with the officious bureaucracy side of it, and in actual fact, she's in a lot of ways more like the kind of heroic Starfleet that you would idolize than some of these people that are like, well, we can't do that, it breaks a rule or whatever. So again, I think that's just ingenious writing of that character, especially for what is ostensibly a comedy. So
I have to give credit to, I think it's the episode Envoys, when at the end she sets up the whole Ferengi situation to give Boimler a chance to shine.
Yeah.
In that moment, I was like, okay, this character has some depth there and some empathy, and she cares about people. So if I have to go back in time, I would say that would be the moment that I really started to see something more, and Crisis Point just solidified it.
The very next thing on my list then is an episode from Star Trek Enterprise, and it's the two-parter In a Mirror Darkly. Would you say that's a hit or a miss? And Chris, are you still with us?
Yes, I'm here, and I'm gonna get in trouble because it's a miss.
Okay, well, as long as you have reasons why, that's fine.
Yeah, like I love the introduction with the whole flip on Star Trek First Contact.
Yeah.
But the campy overacting doesn't work for me. It just didn't. I thought it was awesome to see a Constitution class, working together with an NX-01 class. All the visuals were really cool to see. Archer in the wraparound green uniform, and a CGI Gorn was okay.
It wasn't. It
was okay.
I'll pull you up on that one. That was the one thing that's. I don't know how you managed to make a rubber suit look better than CGI, but somehow they did it.
At the time, I thought it was cool because I did watch that one live. I thought, oh, okay, cool. I hadn't really seen the rubber green suit yet. I knew about it, but it wasn't streaming everywhere back in that time, 2005, I think.
I see.
But it just, I don't go back to it very much because of the camp.
Right.
The overacting, especially with Scott Bakula, just didn't work for me. I don't know. Didn't work for me.
That's fair enough. I can see where you're coming from. I think my counter might be that I think that's kind of the point of the mirror universe. But if you have an issue with that, that's fine.
And I don't ever usually enjoy the mirror universe except for Terra Firma, where I don't think it was camp there. It was done straight.
No.
Right?
Yeah, I think, when you've got an actress like Michelle Yeoh, I don't think she would really be capable of ridiculous over-the-top camp. But again, that was written as a very serious way to explore how this character wasn't part of that morality, I guess, anymore. But that's a topic for another day. But
absolutely.
Yeah. I see what you're saying. It's very arch, and whether it's designed to be or not, if you don't like that, you don't like it. It's perfectly fair. So, Dan, would you say a hit or a miss for that episode?
I'm also going to say a miss, and for somewhat different reasons, though. I like Star Trek camp in moderate amounts, right? And so I don't really have a problem with that. But there's, to me, it's always seemed like there was really no reason for this episode in that series, right?
Right.
I don't think that the mirror universe, I mean, the franchise keeps coming back to it, sometimes more successfully than others. I think this might be the least successful of all the visits to the mirror universe. Now
you're in trouble.
Yeah, it could be. People can come at me on Twitter if they want.
Don't say that, because they will.
I got your back, man. I got your back.
it seems like Enterprise. I absolutely love the show. I think it got short shrift. I think there's a couple times that they made choices like they were reaching or trying too hard to connect it to the rest of the Trek franchise.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
this really feels like, trying to do a rehash when they should have been doing, new things. I mean, that's in some ways that was the best of the premise for this prequel series, is that they had a lot of freedom and a blank slate, and so this doesn't make the most of that.
Dan, you made me think that if they just use those two episodes to push forward the forming of the Federation, I mean, what an opportunity to do something new there. Yeah.
Right.
I'm just going to go ahead and, for the interest of balance, I will say I think In a Mirror Darkly is a huge hit for me personally, but for some pretty shallow reasons, in that I'm the absolute easy mark when it comes to fan service. So you show me a Constitution class ship, you show me the bridge, you show me a Gorn, bad as it was, you give me an actual reason why the Tholians look like that, show me the uniforms and everything, and I personally think the Mirror Universe works better when it's ridiculous. Like, it is basically over the top. These are the characters but evil and arch, and I like that a lot better than kind of Discovery's take, which is just like, what if everyone was a Nazi? It's just like, it's a bit close to the bone, but yeah, anyway. So
well,
yeah,
I'm glad when people like it, because I can see that there's something there fun and and likable. It's just not something I will spend 2 hours on.
Yeah, no, and I fully respect that, but I just like the story that it's telling. And so the very next thing on my list then is very, very broad, I should say, but kind of topical, given that we've just had the Prodigy Star Trek panel today, and that is Catherine Janeway. Hit or miss, Chris?
Oh, a hit.
Okay.
A definite hit. I mean, I can't wait for my daughter, who's 4.5, to grow up to the point where she can really watch Voyager and see Janeway as a role model. I mean, I'm a male, but I can see her as a role model.
Yeah.
That doesn't negate her faults and bad decisions.
No,
but those even make her even better, because even the worst decisions we make doesn't exclude us from making great decisions and making a huge positive impact. So Janeway, with her unique speaking pattern and her ferocity, I love her. She's definite hit.
Awesome. And what about you, Dan?
Yeah, I'll have to say hit as well. Janeway is, to my with my assessment, I mean, I love all of the Star Trek captains. I think that she might be the best leader out of all of them. And it's, amazing in the sense that, she's basically new as a captain. Then she's immediately thrown into this impossible situation and manages to actually get the crew home. It's just a remarkable feat for anyone. And I think that she, although to my mind, she's a little bit too much of a risk junkie. She'll always take the riskier option. But
I mean, to be fair, this is a franchise that started with Captain Kirk.
Sure. But
risk is what we're on her.
The risks pay off, right? And she just shows excellent judgment, excellent all around, good in combat, good in diplomacy, good in managing her personnel, and is really just an extremely excellent example of what a good leader looks like to me.
Yeah, I agree. I think massive hit, because obviously I like Voyager anyway, but I think for a reason that neither of you touched on, but you probably would agree with, I actually like that it explores that she can be flawed and she can be self-doubting, because she's not really in a position not to be when you're all alone on that ship. So I love moments like the episode Night, where it's basically just her almost spiraling into a depression about, like, it was my decision and I've stranded us here, and was it the right thing to do? And Yeah, I loved in the early seasons, especially the kind of like, no, we're going to rigidly stick to these Starfleet morals because it might be all we've got out here, even when it was incredibly difficult at times. And so culminating that in season 5 and 6 with her almost jealousy at the Equinox, which was able to, abandon morality and find these shortcuts. The next thing on my list is just because I've never actually done an alien ship before. So I decided I wanted to write this one. So the Derek's class Romulan warbird. Chris, would you say it's a hit or a miss?
Oh my gosh, an amazing hit.
Okay.
It's my favorite alien starship design because of its size, and just the shapes are so unique, but there's still definite nacelles. The Star Trek language is still there in the ship design, but it's still alien as opposed to the gray, cool kind of design of the Enterprise D. They're just striking. And whenever they show up on the screen, it's just imposing and a little bit of a thrill. I don't know. It never loses that thrill for me.
Awesome.
When I got the Eagle Mouse, just a regular model, it was so small. I'm like, this is disappointing.
Oh.
I should get the XL sometime.
Dan, what would you say to the Romulan Derek's warbird?
Well, I think I'll go with a miss.
Okay.
I don't hate it. It's okay. But the kind of eerie green that they're usually lit up in is it signals kind of sinister enemy, which is appropriate to Romulans. But I've never felt the need to pilot one or really to fanboy about it. It's just sort of, I accept it as part of the universe. It just doesn't excite me all that much.
That's fair enough. Yeah, I'm similarly in two minds about it, but I will, since I'm the tiebreaker, I will lean toward hit because I do think there's something about the basic silhouette and everything that really works, and the fact that it does have an almost bird-like beak at the front, and the empty space allows it to look like wings. But the ultimate selling point for me is just, how do you power your ship? Black hole. Simple as that. Miniature black hole. That's what we use. We're not afraid. So I was like, well, you've got to respect that at the very least, haven't you? So, yeah.
Well said.
Exactly. Cool. But so I'll do one more then, and then we'll move on to the review. So the last thing I had for today then, in that case, you guys, I don't know how familiar you'll be with this. It's the first time I've done something that's not strictly speaking canon, but I bought the model because it was on sale recently, so I'm curious what people think. What would you say about the Enterprise F? Chris, I will start with you.
Well, let me look that up just in case.
It's I think it's from Star Trek Online mainly, but it might have appeared in a couple of comments.
The Odyssey class? Is that
Odyssey
what it
class,
is?
I mean, yeah, specifically, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So the first time I saw that, I really did not like how the neck is shaped with like the open slots around the secondary hull. But from the top, it's a gorgeous ship, and it makes such sense as an evolution from the Sovereign class, with all the kind of dark elements in the hull design. I love the nacelles, nice, sleek, kind of contained shape, but a little shorter than the Sovereign. So overall, I think I like it, but I did not like it at first. It's grown on me over the years, and actually, I want to get a model. I don't want the Star Trek Online model.
No, I didn't. I didn't opt for that one. I bought it because it was. I don't even know if it still is. If you were interested, I should have mentioned, but because it was reduced to half price, so it was under £10 in my money. I ordered it
for
for
Comic-Con. Perhaps it might still be. I might have to check after the show.
Give it a look, but I would say, get the one with Federation livery rather than the online livery, because I just think the online, the bright white with the black sort of stripes and stuff just looks ugly to me. So I
agree. It's too stark.
Yeah.
But so my final answer, it's a hit.
Okay, so hit, but not among your top favorite ships ever. But that's fair enough. Okay, Dan, are you familiar with the Enterprise F? Do you have an opinion either way?
Well, yeah, I'm going to say it's a miss. Not because it's objectively a bad or ugly design, but just because the profile. It's too Voyager-y, right? It has this elongated saucer section. It looks very close to the Voyager design, which is a great design, but I like my Enterprise saucers to be round. What can I say?
Okay,
I mean, that's a good point for sure.
Yeah, and absolutely completely respect that fact. Somebody did actually say to me when I posted a picture of the model, and who hadn't seen it before, it looks like the baby of a Sovereign and an Intrepid class. And I was like, oh yeah, I guess it kind of does in a way.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can see where you're coming from. If you want your Enterprises to have a round saucer, it's very much not that. It's entirely pointed, and yeah. So, well, that's fair enough. I personally would go with a hip, but again, I was in two minds, and I do not like the Star Trek Online official markings and stuff that I said on it. But when I received the model of the Federation version, it looks really cool. I have to say, it surprised me when you actually see it in person, even though it's only one of the smaller models. And I was like,
well,
okay,
now I'm getting it. Darn it!
It looks really good next to the Enterprise E as well, because, like you said, as an evolution of that design, when you place them side by side on a shelf, it's like, yeah, I can see where you're coming from with it. I'll move this on then, because I've probably done enough hit or misses for one day. So I'll move to the main review, which, as I said, we're going to do a couple. So I will start with the episode Q&A, because we're doing a couple of short treks, and I've been informed, just as a little bit of feedback, that maybe I should give a brief synopsis, because some people may not have seen the episode or may need their memory jogging. So just to clarify, Q&A, pretty easy to get into because it's only a short. Basically, it's Ensign Spock's first day on the USS Enterprise, his first encounter with the character number one, and the two get stuck in a turbo lift and get to know each other. There's not really much else to say beyond that. So with that in mind, Chris, did you have any first thoughts on Q&A?
Any opportunity to kind of get into the mind of one of our beloved characters at the beginning of their story is a wonderful opportunity. I like Ethan Peck's portrayal of Spock.
Yes.
For the most part. Overall, the episode is not one of my favorites in the end.
Okay.
Just the complete package.
Okay,
I love when a character is stuck with another character in an enclosed space. You get some good interaction.
What about you, Dan? Do you have any general thoughts before we get into it about Q&A?
Yeah, I'm generally quite positive. I mean, I do. Okay. I am a sucker for these. For any time you get two Starfleet officers stuck in a room and having a drawn out dialogue, I really like the intensity of those. And for this, I really like the fact that they're both characters who, in their own ways, have a front to maintain. And that they're able to kind of open up to each other a little bit in a way that that gives us insight into both. So that's my overall take.
Absolutely. You've hit on something there that I did want to mention that I personally see in the episode, but again, maybe it's just me, which is that obviously during the cage, Spock wasn't the character we knew, as everyone knows. And the number one character, I suppose, was kind of the Spock, because she was the cold, emotionless, you'd have more luck mating with the computer type character. So I think it was a stroke of genius to bring these two characters who are effectively, in the way they were originally introduced, almost the same character, but also explaining how Spock became more that than the kind of laughing, smiling guy from the cage, how he was taught by someone amongst, as well as the ones we know, Sarek and whatnot, he was taught by someone else about, maybe hide your more outlandish attributes as a Vulcan. People might be disturbed by it, and but also, you can still feel these things. You can still be unique in your own way. I'm definitely not telling anybody not to do that, but maybe, just keep it a bit quieter, I guess. Which I appreciated. I think it was interesting. From any other character, it might have come off as mean, but from number one, I thought it worked. So let me just start as well by saying I really like the direction of the episode. I think whoever directed it, and I should have looked it up, I'm sorry, I always say that, but whoever directed it did a great job with kind of the hero reveals of Spock from the transporter and the various kind of weird Dutch angles as the turbo lift gets stuck, and the passage of time and making it look cramped and uncomfortable. I think they did, again, a fantastic job getting everything across that you needed to in what was about 15 minutes. So shout out to that, first of all. I do like as well that they have a lot of the original series sounds that are the same ones in the background, which I appreciate, because, as I say, little fanboy touches like that I always respond to. This might be controversial. What are your two thoughts on this turbo lift network, as we say it here?
Chris, you want to go first?
Oh, sure. I'm not a fan of the roller coaster turbo lifts, and I don't use that as a derogatory. It's just I feel like that's the common language we've used.
Mhm.
Because in the script they say a lieutenant is going to propel down the turbo lift shaft to save them, and there's no turbo lift shaft to propel down, you know?
Yeah, because it's on rails.
Yeah, it's on rails. So there was an opportunity to either change the dialogue to match what's actually on screen, or change what's on screen to match with what has been presented. It, you know, I don't want to be one of the people that get hung up on that.
No,
but it doesn't ruin the story. That's not why it doesn't hit for me. It is just one of the visual problems I have the most issues with in Discovery.
Yeah, I probably would agree with that, but we'll go to you first, Dan, and see what your thoughts are on this movie.
Yeah, you know, I don't mind. Like, you know, I'm not the kind of person either who's going to react to a new design element and say, well, why didn't we have that in TOS? And but it just, you know, it doesn't seem like efficient spaceship design. Like there's huge open space where with nothing going on in there. I'm like, what is this space being used for? Just to route elevators in weird kind of twisty configurations. It didn't seem to quite be the right way to design the interior of the spaceship.
But it does look really cool. I mean, it really
looks
does
cool.
look cool.
It looks cool. Yeah.
And that's why, like, if they just change that dialogue, okay, you're aware of what you're doing, but like the dialogue to me makes it seem like they're not speaking together, the writers and the production.
Interesting.
Maybe.
Yeah. I hadn't thought of that, but I see your point.
I absolutely hate it. And again, I'm not one of those. I do not want to come across as one of those people that's like, and this is why New Trek sucks and blah blah blah. It's just one of those visual things that it's not an elevator or a lift, if you want to call it that. At that point, it's a monorail or a cable car network or something. Because the turbo lifts only ever went up and down, left and right. They didn't start doing loop to loops and travel this vast distance and stuff. So it's very jarring to me. And again, I can accept kind of visual reboots and things. A lot of the people that complain about the starships are too big, it doesn't really bother me because it's like, well, how can you tell? You've got to have a comparison first of all. And as long as it looks like these people are inside of it, I'm not bothered. But when you get something like that, I think it throws me out with the story because I'm like, well, that couldn't possibly fit inside of there.
Well, and if that kind of lift system showed up in the refit Discovery, I would be like, oh, that's pretty cool. But because it showed up pre-TOS, and this is a whole discussion about canon, blah, blah, blah. And I'm not interested in that. I usually focus on what I like.
No, of course.
But it does seem to be a leap too far for me to accept it easily.
Yeah, I agree. Again, it doesn't ruin anything for me, and I don't.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm not going to be like, oh, fire Kurtzman because the lifts aren't right or whatever. But and again, it's a far greater problem. But we'd be getting into the weeds with that when it appears in the end of Discovery season 3, and it's ridiculous. It's ludicrous how much space they have. Like I'm fine.
But I can take it there. I can accept it. It makes total sense because it's a refit, future technology, whatever you want to explain it. I can gel with that.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, fair enough.
It's just prior to that refit with future 32nd century technology, it is a little tougher for me to accept.
Yeah, and again, I mean, there's things that I can accept a lot easier because technically, I've had people complain because they say, "Well, this is set pre the cage, and so the uniforms and the ship and everything aren't right." And I'm like, "Well, of course they're not gonna use the 1960s, graphic designs, and these are different actors and everything anyway." There's a point where you've got to suspend disbelief, I guess, and be fine with it. But in the case of things like the turbo lift network, I just think it's a change that didn't need to be done. You could just as easily have not addressed it at all, not even seen the outside of it. So it did just seem like flourish for the sake of it. But anyway, not to get too hung up on all that. It was my only real kind of huge bugbear with the episode, I think. And I kind of wish they'd kept things as they were with that, but never mind. Yeah, I do love as well that he's not really in the episode much, but it ultimately turns out to be quite heavily about Captain Pike. The kind of description of the 3 salient points of him was something that I really appreciated because it was we've mentioned it before, but it feeds into like him as the Starfleet ideal, which I kind of like.
Yes, definitely.
Awesome. And I do like that Spock basically puzzles out what number one's name is without directly asking, just when he asks about the matrix they use on the food devices or whatever, and she calls it the Una matrix, and he's like, your name is Una. I've worked it out. So I do like a little bit of it's simple, but a little bit of deductive reasoning to show that these people are quite intelligent and not averse to working things out. But I also love on a complete opposite tangent that Spock very briefly criticizes the Prime Directive.
Yes.
And it's kind of amusing that number one is just like, no, I don't question it. And if you want to get by on here, you shouldn't either. So it's kind of like, it's a comedy moment, but it's intriguing potentially for what it could say for the future. Number one kind of having this wanderlust about kind of looking at the stars and what that kind of did for her. Because there's very much a lot of that in this episode of that Star Trek, longing for more, I guess.
Well, and Spock and Pike and number one share that at the end, which is it's probably my favorite moment in that short when they're staring at the star formation on the view screen. Definitely.
So the next thing, just to get you guys involved again, because it was a question I wasn't 100% about, and I kind of alluded to it earlier, which is she addresses Spock smiling and says it's not what Vulcans do, and it's kind of disconcerting. But then you kind of do get the thing where she points out that diversity is important because she would never tell anybody not to be what they want to be. But in this case, she is kind of seeing through that he would have command in his future. And so to kind of temper it down for that reason. And I'm never quite sure on this. Is that kind of, is it fair and reasonable, or is she being a little bit kind of like,
so I'm a coach. I coach teachers now.
Okay.
For middle school and high school. And I struggle with the same kind of concept they're dealing with. And this episode made me really think about that because I'm in leadership, how much of the ranting and connection can I have with the teachers that I'm coaching? Because if they're going to receive insight and instruction from me, I can't, there has to be a little bit of a distance, right?
Yeah.
So, and finding that balance and that distance is really important. And I think that's what number one's alluding to. You can't show everything about yourself to the people that might be serving under you because they have to have confidence in you.
Right.
And I think that's a fine line and a really interesting thing for this short to say, because I don't think that's really been said too much in Trek before. Obviously, Picard takes her point or her position throughout in his command style. He kind of has a distance between himself and the crew.
I do remember it coming up briefly in, I can't remember the episode, but in the first season of Voyager, I remember Janeway kind of wrestling with, does she keep the traditional formal distance of a captain, or because they're all kind of stuck in that one place together, does she, dine with them and get to know them and be on a bit more friendly terms?
I think it's in parallels. I think you're right.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Cool.
To me, this issue is really the best of this little short, and why I like it so much. The number one that we got in the cage is described in very 60s kind of sexualizing terms of like, oh, she's this frigid kind of she's not a real woman, something like this, right? And this little short kind of resets that and puts it in a way that is very familiar to what I hear from female colleagues talking about the way they feel they have to act in professional situations, is that often they feel like they don't have as much freedom to be kind of relaxed and personal as male colleagues, just because they won't be taken seriously. And so I really sympathized with number one, kind of giving a little backstory about why she wants to remain detached, being in this position of leadership. And that to me felt like a much truer story for what it feels like to be a woman in a position of leadership.
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating story. And again, it's something that hopefully we can explore more now that there's going to be a series. But what kind of brought me fully around was that it's something that she would never ask Spock to do that she doesn't do herself. And when she kind of points out that she's well aware how painful it can be kind of hiding yourself, there's a depth to that revelation and that kind of vulnerability to her, I guess, that was kind of like, oh, okay, wow, I get now where you're coming from. And it's kind of like, but you two have found in each other the confidants that you can, you both know that you have to hide yourselves a little bit, but not necessarily to each other. And this is their first meeting. And I always love that when any two characters meet for the first time and they develop a bond and it's fully believable, even though they've just met. So for me, I liked the way the dialogue was written and the scenes there for that. And that feeds into number one kind of showing her freaky, as they call it, which I don't love the way that it's described because it just seems a little bit silly, but that's neither here nor there. But I do love, and you guys may already know this, I love this story about the reasons why number one's particular thing is to be singing Gilbert and Sullivan, which is just because Rebecca Romaine can do it, which I didn't know. Because apparently there was nothing written in the script. It was just like, and number one shows a hidden talent. And then they asked Rebecca Romaine, do you have any hidden talents? And she was like, oh, I'm a traditionally trained singer who used to sing Gilbert and Sullivan, and I've never had to use it in any job. And they were like, right, that'll do.
That's really interesting trivia. I mean, because it works so well. Because that little, I mean, it totally fits a Star Trek.
It does completely, yeah.
Commander, right? Yeah.
It does, but I think it also has that truth because it comes from the actress and because it is something that you can see she's connected to and kind of passionate about, which fair enough, it could just be good acting as well. But I think there is a little bit of a twinkle in her eye because she's like, oh, I get to do this now. So, which I like. I appreciate that. And again, it's just glorious when Spock joins in. And like I said, anytime it's an unspoken bond between these two characters, which I think is great. I like again, it's a directing type decision, but I like that it's kind of silent after that moment and awkward. And then the music kind of cuts in from nowhere and it's almost intrusive. Like, oop, it's interrupted a quiet moment here, which is nice. The last two notes that I have are just kind of geeky spots, which is the engineer Upjohn, who's trying to rescue them from the turbo lift. I noticed is Welsh, and I'm curious if that's a deliberate kind of reference to Scotty being Scottish. Secondly, it was really nice to see Lieutenant Amin again, who was in Such Sweet Sorrow on the Enterprise. So there you go. And finally, again, directing note, I love that it's very on the nose, but Spock, who has literally come to admire this woman on a huge level, literally watches her ascend like an angel out of the turbo lift, and it is very much played as that moment. And then that feeding into, do Vulcans feel awe? They do, Captain, but they tend to keep it to themselves as a sweet little double meaning to cap off the episode. I absolutely love that. I think it's brilliant dialogue, fantastic writing. Can't really say much else beyond that. So did you two have any other thoughts on the episode that we haven't talked about yet then?
It's odd in the beginning when Spock is in the other ship's transporter, the camera's panning over his ear. It's panning over his insignia. It pans over his fingers. And I'm like, would we do that with any other character? Or is it because of the awe we all have for Spock, the character? And those moments bothered me because it seemed more artificial than it should be. Praising this young Spock who is no one special yet, in the universe at this time. So maybe that's why like the short starts off, and I was just pulled out in that moment. And I like I said, I don't usually go with the things that I find critical.
No, that's fine.
To bring something to this discussion, I think I should go all in.
That's fine, yeah. And I would disagree just for the sake, not just for the purposes of disagreeing, but I do disagree because I think I like any director that's like, this is the hero shot. And ultimately, whether it's the Spock that we know or not, he is the hero of this episode. He's the protagonist. So to me, it kind of made sense, I guess.
I can see that for sure.
Yeah, but I get what you're saying. I mean, it perhaps overly fetishizes to a degree that's a little bit silly.
Well, just think about Spock being revealed in Unification 1 at the end in TNG. He comes out of the shadows, and it's a great moment, but it doesn't like go on these icons of our culture, the ears, the hands, the badge. It almost pulled me out of Star Trek that it's emphasizing the icons of Star Trek in this story. Does that make sense? I don't know if that makes sense.
It does, but I'm on the other side. Neither one of us are wrong, but I'm completely on board for that because I appreciate that being such a fan, and I can appreciate what they're doing because, like I said, I'm the sucker that's kind of like, oh, it's Vulcan ears, it's a Starfleet insignia, and anytime that they very much play the awe and we'll get into it again with the next episode, but the awe and the wonder of being on the Enterprise. And anytime they do that, I'm always like, yep, absolutely, I'm there with you. I can
and
see
I'm
what
very
you're saying.
I'm very sentimental, so I don't know why that bothered me, but it did.
Yeah. So what about you, Dan? Did you have any other thoughts that we haven't touched on?
Well, I'll just add to your discussion, not without taking sides on this.
Okay, fair enough.
But one little aspect of that initial opening that I loved is that there is just a moment where we get a close up of Spock's mouth, and he has a tiny kind of half Mona Lisa smile going on there.
Yes, I love that moment.
Which does connect into the whole theme and the discussion of, you know, hiding yourself or self-expression. So I just do like that, those few frames, and that is fun for me.
Awesome. That's fair enough. So what I will do now then, just for this particular episode, we'll go one by one, and I will ask for a conclusion if you guys have one. I know it's probably going to be on the fly, and then a score that you would give this out of 5 Starfleet deltas. We'll go in order again, so I'll start with you, Chris, and say, do you have a conclusion and a score for Q&A?
Yeah, Q&A is a wonderful little introduction to Spock's first day on the Enterprise, and a fun back and forth between him and number 1. And I give it a 3 out of 5 insignia.
Okay, awesome. Fair enough. And what about you then, Dan? Do you have a conclusion and a score?
Yeah, I think this is a wonderful little vignette. It could stand on its own, even if we didn't know anything about these two characters. But it's also giving me a lot of hope for interesting things to think about as Strange New World starts spinning up. And I think I'm going to give it 4 out of 5 deltas.
Awesome. And I just said, I think it's a fantastic use of the format to show us an important moment that we might not have gotten to see otherwise. I think the script is whip smart, running with the basic initial concept that number 1 was the Spock character and Spock was more shouty and smiley, as a way to kind of explain those discrepancies in canon, I guess, that some people would call it, but that for me are just more interesting as character beats. I like that it uses these facts to flesh out and develop both characters. I think the acting is breathtaking, the direction is perfect, but unfortunately minus points for the ridiculous turbo lift network and the fact that, yes, it is so brief and therefore it's a little bit unable to sit in some of the emotion that it engenders, because it kind of has to by nature be a bit faster. And so, yeah, I also would have said 4 out of 5 stars. So yeah,
good episode of Star Trek. That's what we gotta say, right? That's the average.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll probably end up rounding it up, but yeah, 3 and 2 4s I do not think is a bad score at all. So we'll move on to Ask Not, which again, just to give you a quick summary, this is basically a young Starfleet cadet named Sidhu is on a starbase when a Starfleet prisoner is brought in, who is quickly revealed to be Captain Pike, who is basically trying to talk her into freeing him because the base is under attack by Tholians, or so it seems, and it's essentially a wrestling with, does she obey this Starfleet legend and do as he says, or obey rules and regulations and stick to her Starfleet training? And I won't spoil the ending, but we will later, so be warned if you haven't seen this. So just quickly then, we'll start with you this time, Dan. Do you have any initial spoiler-free thoughts on Ask Not and what you thought of it?
So my initial thoughts on it are that it is an interesting moment of what it might look like to be a cadet newly assigned to a post, and it gives us an interesting view on, you know, assessment and the relationship of command decisions to how much you trust your personnel. But there's also some big problems with it for me. So I'm kind of I have mixed feelings about this.
I'm sure we'll get into it. We may end up agreeing or we may end up disagreeing. We'll see. But what about you then, Chris? What would you say, spoiler-free as possible, about the episode in general?
I absolutely love this episode.
Fair enough. I think it was you that requested we do it, actually. But there we go.
Yes.
Okay.
I've written and produced a video essay on Pike as an archetype of Roddenberry's humanism, and this episode definitely factored into that.
Right.
I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, okay, I can see that becoming a debate potentially later, but I'll move us in first of all to the bigger sort of themes of this. And I will say that again, the first thing that I've got to say, and sorry to be a broken record, great direction. I think the way that the intro is wonderfully unnerving and shocking. That unlike some of the other short tracks, it doesn't start with a title, so you're immediately thrown into like chaos, alarms blaring, and the camera not staying still. And so you get these odd angles and close-up shots and things. And then obviously the reveal of Captain Pike, I think, would be a great way to either end the cold open for a regular length story or to give you an act break kind of shock. And I think it still works, even though I do think the actual design of the mask is ridiculous. Could have just been a black hood. It doesn't need to be this disassembling mesh of weird metal triangles for no reason. In terms of the start of the episode then, which is the kind of, us being flung into it and the reveal, what did you two have any thoughts on what you thought about that? Was it effective, or would you kind of not on board yet? Chris, will start you.
I was totally on board. We're just kind of jarred into this situation and totally into Sidhu's point of view and the desperate situation, and immediately a teaser. So there's no teaser in a short like this, but we're asked to wonder what is going on. Yeah, and that's what good fiction does. It hooks you right from the beginning. So I think it's really effective in the beginning.
Okay, yeah, it definitely hits the ground running. What about you, Dan? Any thoughts up to now as until we get to the Pike reveal?
Well, I feel the same as Chris for the first watch through, but I have critiques of this moment that can only be discussed post spoiler.
Okay, no problem. Me, it seems like the very next scene, Captain Pike is acting very out of character towards the Tholians. Oh, they're not human. They need to be just wiped out. We need to just do what needs to be done. And I get that that's possibly the point because, spoiler alert, it's a big test. But to me, it kind of jarred because even the first time around, and because this character's meeting him for the first time, I was a little bit wary of, well, isn't she getting the sense that this is very out of character for him? And I was curious what you thought about that, particularly if you liked the episode, Chris. Did you not mind that? And what would you kind of rebut that with, I guess?
No, I totally got that same concern when I first watched it. I'm like, this isn't the Pike that we just saw for a whole season.
Yeah.
And my rebuttal would be, this is a cadet who probably has heard of Chris Pike as a legend in Starfleet, but often when we meet or learn more about our legends, they're just people and they're not always the best people. Like, I think it's pretty believable that she would be shocked, and I think the actress portrays the shock and dismay at seeing Pike pushing her in this way and trying to manipulate her by calling on her antagonism or feelings towards the Tholians. It works for me though.
Yeah, because I should have said it does feed into her personal story in that her husband, I think it was, survived an attack by the Tholians previously. So she was kind of a victim of them who'd suffered that PTSD. Which again, in retrospect, makes this test a little bit cruel, but I'm sure we'll talk about that later. Dan, what about you? Did you have any thoughts about this particular moment or not?
Well, it was fun watching this right after Q&A, because if we've been paying attention to number one's description of Pike,
yes,
then of course his sort of bloodlust to go after the Tholians doesn't make sense, and maybe that's a little clue as to where this is going. So I thought that was pretty good, and I appreciated that. Yeah,
that's fair enough. Just as a quick geeky spot, I did like as well that the directive about in a combat situation, command falls to the vessel with tactical superiority. I did recognize that from Voyager. I think,
Equinox.
Yeah, I think it was Equinox or Equinox, absolutely. And it's almost word for word, which I was like, yay. On a more positive note, I do like how stalwart Cadew manages to keep throughout the episode. I like that she points out, loopholes aren't her style. But I don't love how aggressive Pike is in retrospect at this moment, because yes, we know with the benefit of hindsight, it's a test and whatever else. But to me, he just gets a little bit too close to being overly aggressive towards a very young woman, which is a little bit disconcerting optically speaking. And I appreciate that. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I will push against, like, that's the point of it, right?
Yeah.
To make her so uncomfortable and intimidated and threatened. Will she break with her oath to Starfleet protocol and regulations?
Yeah.
I mean, I see that because I felt that uncomfortableness
Yeah.
when he started acting so aggressive and like leaning towards her. I definitely
Yeah.
feel that every single time I see it, even though I know
Yeah.
it's coming. So I definitely
Yeah.
see that.
Yeah, and again, in terms of the direction, in terms of what it's trying to get across, the music ramping up and the kind of tension that's portrayed as she points the phaser, it's perfectly done. But to me, it's just kind of a bit too jarring. Which, you know, maybe I'm not on my own with that. We'll see. But
Well,
yeah,
to me, in that moment, I'm cheering for her. Like, I'm
yeah,
totally
of course.
now, she's the protagonist. I'm like, she is awesome, and she will be an amazing Starfleet officer once she graduates. I really want to see more of Cadet Sihu.
But I do like that Pike does seem genuinely sorry when the kind of simulation's over. So at least there is that. He genuinely is apologetic. And he calls out that it's inhumane. And some people might see it as that way. Yes, I do remember the command training scenes from Next Generation. Again,
But even then, she knew it was a hologram of him.
Yeah, true.
Right.
But I mean, that's the point. Is that would you actually do it though if that was the case? And but yeah,
that's why
absolutely.
I find this test to be really interesting, because the Kobayashi Maru, everyone's going to know it's a no-win scenario. So what's kind of the point of the test? This test was an unknown test, and you can really gauge a feeling for the character's character and integrity.
For Sea Dude, absolutely, yeah, completely. But again, I don't. My particular issue would be that, like, when is she going to necessarily be in this kind of situation? Because this is my other criticism, was that Pike says, "Oh, it might seem extreme and inhumane, but war is all those things," which just left me to question, well, what war's going on at the moment? You're not engaged in one, you know. It's an even weirder choice to make it that she's an engineer, not even like a command officer. So the odds of her having to make any of these decisions are pretty astronomical anyway, which jarred a little bit. And yeah, I just thought, I don't love this idea that Starfleet is, oh, we're always ready for war, we've got to be prepared, because to me it was, what you should be testing is how well can you use sensors and scan a planet for life forms and stuff.
It's fair that it didn't resonate with you as matching with your Star Trek.
Yeah, absolutely. My other thought, first of all, I know it's a geeky thing, but engineering is almost as stupid as the turbo lifts. It just looks ridiculous and not like engineering on a Constitution class ship. It's huge. It's just completely unnecessarily huge and complex, and just looks silly to me. But again, I can live with it. But enough from me. Dan, we've went right the way through. So what were your kind of thoughts and critiques on the episode and the general idea?
Well, okay. So assuming that spoilers are now okay.
Yeah, no, I've gone for it. Yeah.
I think that the initial moments of this are good on a first watch through. It really does serve the function of immediately drawing us in, getting us on the edge of our seats, raising the stakes, and that's fun. But on a second watch through, once you know how it ends, and you know it's just a test, it really is a bad kind of sour note for me, both for inside like in-world reasons and for writing reasons, because it's not just like there's red alert alarms going off. There's actual explosions. And Sidu is knocked to the ground. She is completely uninjured, but she could easily have been very seriously injured. And okay, in world, if Pike was willing to authorize explosions that could possibly maim a cadet in order to do this little test, then that's incredibly reckless and terrible decision making.
I guess,
and so that's a sour note. But then also, just I don't like it when writers do this, right? And that is to kind of when there's going to be a big reveal, right? And then you get sucked in, but then after the reveal, something previous to the reveal from the beginning or middle of the story doesn't make sense anymore once you've had that reveal. Right. To me, that's cheating, and that's just bad writing. And so that really it always bugs me when I see something like that, and so this is an example of it. I'm a little sore about it.
Fair enough. Personally, I didn't really mind or get into the weeds as much about the kind of, oh, there's explosions and you might get hurt kind of thing. Not to say that it's not valid, but to me, it was very much a background consideration, I guess. But yeah, I can see where you're coming from, though. And again, in retrospect, when you know it's a test and you're watching just how crazy things are at the start, you very much are within your rights to be like, oh, this is very uncomfortable knowing what we know now. So
yeah, Dan, I hadn't thought of that because she's forced to the ground. She's knocked to the ground from the force of these fake explosions or torpedo hits. That is pretty intense.
Yeah.
Which I would get in big trouble if I tried teaching like that.
Yeah. I mean, I get it from a TV drama standpoint, but ultimately, like you said, if this was an actual test run by people who are meant to be as nice as Starfleet, maybe number one has needs to be reprimanded for just how realistic she made the simulation, I guess.
Yeah, this is just turn the shake-o-meter down a little bit.
So we'll do the same again, then we'll go with conclusions and scores, but just in the interest of keeping it fresh, I'll start with you, I think, Dan, this time, and get your conclusion and just score out of 5 stars / Starfleet Deltas.
Sure. Well, I mean, apart from that, I do think it's an interesting test, right? And it focuses a lot of our attention on an important aspect of this franchise and how things work. It comes down very clearly on one side of a debate, where elsewhere in the franchise, disobeying orders is sometimes the clearly right thing to do.
Yes, true.
But that's fine, and it's fine to have that tension and because these are both important parts of the series as we know it. So I like it. With the sour note that I mentioned, I'll just give it a 3 out of 5 stars.
Okay, fair enough. That's still pretty good. So, Chris, what about you? Your conclusion and score?
Well, I think what the character trait that marks Pike the most is his integrity for me.
Okay.
And in this episode, he's testing the integrity of Cadet Sidhu. And for me, like Mike, I saw your issues were with how Pike's portrayed, but my attention's completely on the cadet the entire time. This is her story in my mind. And every line of dialogue exchange between both of those, every look, every body movement is communicating so much character and theme that it's just a really strong distillation of a story. And it's even shorter than Q&A, I think. In Q&A, there's a lot of superfluous lines that could be taken out and it wouldn't affect the story. But in this, I think every moment is pretty critical to the character. And for that reason, that it's such a strong character story for a character they're introducing and exploring in one episode. For that reason, I give it a 5.
So a 3 and a 5. I'll give my thoughts then. Not my favorite short trek, to be honest. It just seems mean-spirited and unnecessary. Because to me, there's more to Starfleet than war, and she's not even in command, as I said. So shouldn't her test really involve fixing something? That said, I have to credit the actors for a brilliant job again, and the director for doing so much with so little to keep things claustrophobic, nerve-wracking, and moving along. The end moment of awe at the Enterprise that we touched on is very nice, and it's good to see the familiar characters and Pike eventually come back to being his inspiring self. There's some interesting things here which could well have been explored more deeply in a full-length episode, but I'm afraid overall it's just a bit of a misfire for me, and I would say 2 out of 5. So there you go. So that would give
we
us
got the full spectrum here.
Absolutely. So that was a total of 10. Yeah. So the very next section then, just quickly, is a section that I like to do on the podcast, a section that I call Gene's Vision, which is that it's something that everybody always quotes as what Star Trek needs to have. And to me, Star Trek always has it, even in the examples that some people would claim don't. So just quickly, in these 2 short treks, can either of you think of any examples that you'd like to call out of particularly great Star Trek ideology that you think might fit with the generally received idea of what Gene's vision would be? And I'll start with you, Chris.
Gene's vision. There's a lot about that on the internet these days.
Indeed.
And there's a lot there. But I think, like I said with Ask Not, it's about if you're going to be the Starfleet officer, which you're called to be the best of the best of humanity, you have to be the best of the best, even in the worst situations. And that's what this test is trying to determine for the cadet. Does she have what it takes to hold firm to her morals like Janeway, even in the worst situations?
I see that, yeah.
And with Q&A, I just love that Jean's vision about being curious and asking questions.
Yes, yeah.
I think absolutely. That's at the core of Star Trek.
Awesome. Yeah, I would probably agree 100%. That would be one of the things I would say as well, certainly for Q&A. But yeah, so what about you, Dan? Did you have anything that you'd want to shout out to mention about that?
You know, I was going to go with that theme of curiosity. I mean, on Q&A is sort of obvious, right? As directly there.
Yeah, completely.
And to the point where, you know, the part of the humor is that Spock is asking too much.
Yeah.
But also, you know, Ask Not, despite the title, it is also about questioning. In this case, Pike wanting to know if this young cadet has the medal. So some of the questions were encouraged to ask from the start of Jean's vision is, you know, do you have it in you?
So what it is then, I'll just quickly finish us off with the usual section. Final section is what I call Subspace Communications. And that's just basically audience feedback, where I put out a tweet or a message and just ask people what they think of the episodes in question. And this is from both my Twitter and from Chris's, because Chris is always putting out what he's watching, and I always enjoy seeing it and seeing all of his various quizzes and bits and pieces on Twitter. So shout out, do follow at Shelf Nerds on Twitter, because it's a fantastic Trek follow. And while you're there,
thank you.
At Earl Grey on Twitter is not too shabby either. So there you go. So let me just say that, first of all, this is from... sorry, I do not have the full title, but it's somebody called Physical Distance Instead of something, who just says that they wonder if Cadet Sidu is going to be in Strange New Worlds. Chris hopes so, obviously. And they say, yeah, it could be interesting to see her evolution to higher ranks after the incident with Pike. Yeah, and again, just Chris and this person agreeing she was fantastic, which I agree. Absolutely.
I agree with myself.
There's a surprise.
I don't always.
And this is from @Niall_Maxted, who said, I loved it. 2 amazing actors going at it. Amazing. It aligns in with Pike later being an instructor as well, which I didn't actually think about, but yeah, that's true. Like he got into the idea of wanting to be an instructor to shape the next generation. Absolutely. Good point.
That's really cool.
Yeah. @Trek Fan Rick, who was our guest a couple of weeks ago, said, I love Ask Not. I think I suspected something was up, but I was pretty drawn into it. So I wasn't really trying to second guess it. I was hooked on the 2 actors doing their thing and thought they both did brilliantly. So there you go. Contrary to that, @HG Chuck says, I'm not a fan of secret test of character plots, at least when they're applied by the allegedly good guys. They necessarily involve the tester deceiving the candidate, which potentially erodes trust. Which I think feeds into some of our criticism. Well, I only have one response to the tweet asking about Q&A, and that's Daniel Jakobovitz, who just says, I really enjoyed it. So not a lot of feedback, but there we go. Interesting thoughts, I think, and an interesting discussion between all of us, I think, on that one. So that concludes things for this particular episode. Before we go, just quickly, did you have any last things that you wanted to shout out, where people can find you on socials and other projects that you're working on? And again, I'll start with you, Dan, this time.
Okay, sure. So again, the best way to find me is by looking me up on Twitter, and that's @Mr. Earl G. And I don't have a Star Trek podcast of my own, but I am co-host of a Foundation podcast. So if anyone there is a fan of Asimov or the new Apple TV adaptation, you can check us out at Stars End Podcast on your favorite podcast feed.
Excellent.
Well, I cannot wait to watch that series, and when I do, I'm hitting you up.
Great.
Awesome.
Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. That's great. Yeah, you guys are great Twitter follows anyway, generally. And so, yeah, Chris, did you have anything you wanted to shout out, or social handles or anything?
I mean, you mentioned @Shelf Nerds, but on YouTube, I have a YouTube channel where I talk a lot about Star Trek called Completing the Shelf. And so check me out there for more, mostly probably 99% positive takes on Star Trek.
Yeah, that's fair enough. And I think we all love Star Trek, and we're all definitely not the people that are like anything would ruin a franchise that we love. And I like that we can have interesting debates, disagree, and still remain friends, because so far on the podcast, I've had that with every one of my guests. And once again, you two have been fantastic just to talk, to have, differing views and yet fully understand each other, and to talk Star Trek, which is always fun. So hopefully we can...
Yes.
Hopefully we can still all stay in touch via Twitter and stuff, and maybe even talk again on a future podcast as things develop. But in particular for this series, join us again next week when I am going to be joined by two friends of mine. They are a couple. They are Andy Kemp and Phil English. One huge Trekkie and one who is being introduced to Star Trek through Next Generation for the first time. And we are, all three of us, going to be reviewing the Next Gen episode, Yesterday's Enterprise. So do stay tuned for that. So yeah, it just remains for me to say thank you so much to Chris and to Dan for joining me and for making another brilliant episode. And join us again later. And in the meantime, remember, we are Starfleet. Live long and prosper.